I suppose without any further ado, I'll get basically started. What I will say is that I'm going to first talk a little bit about Conservation Cafe and Nature Forward, the organization. And then I'll take a moment to introduce you briefly, but I just got to know you just this year, and so I'll leave you plenty of time to introduce yourself as well. I like to give people sort of a personal introduction that explains how this relationship, this opportunity to work together and speak together came to be. So I'll start. So first of all, welcome everyone. We are here tonight with Nature Forward. I'm Eliza Cava, the Director of Conservation for Nature Forward, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Nature Forward inspires residents of the greater Washington, D.C. region to appreciate, understand, and protect their natural environments through outdoor experiences, education, and advocacy. And our vision is to create a larger and more diverse community of people who treasure the natural world and work to preserve it. And we, until a month ago, were called Audubon Naturalist Society and have been some form of an Audubon Society for 125 years. So we're the oldest independent environmental organization in the DC region. And that means that our entire history as an organization has been on Piscataway lands. And the work that we have done has always been on Piscataway lands. And we have only, so far as I know, in the recent few years, really learned to acknowledge that and understand just the tip of the iceberg of what it means to be working and living and investing in environmental protection and education and advocacy on unceded tribal lands. And so it was my great honor through Hope Code to get to know Mr. Rico Newman at our Naturally Latinos conference this year in March, when he came and he gave a land acknowledgement where we were at the Silver Spring Civic Center. And it was short. We didn't give him a lot of time on the agenda, but he said, I have so much more I can say about this. And I said, I hope you will come back and share with us again. And I'll take a moment to just tell you a little bit about how I've gotten to know Mr. Newman or Elder Rico. I'm going to read you a little bit of his formal bio, but again, I'll just share with you how moving it was to get to know him in this context of introducing our conference, our Naturally Latinos conference, with a land acknowledgement. We have, as an organization, Nature Forward and Audubon Naturalist Society, occasionally tried to give some of our own land acknowledgements. And of course, not that we would ever try, but we don't speak, an Algonquian derived language. We don't, there's only so much we can share beyond the history, which we have done so. It was very, very, it was a great gift that you were able to come and join us in person at the conference. We really appreciated it very much. And so Mr. Newman has 3 sons, 7 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren. He had a long career with various federal and DC agencies, then in real estate, and then he's been working in sharing and transmitting Native American and Piscataway history with the Museum of the American Indian and with the Maryland Commission on Indian Affairs and many others. He was one of those integrally involved in helping achieve state recognition for the Piscataway, and well, I'll leave it to him to share more about what he wants to share, but I will say that he's been an educator. If you look him up, you will see that he has many videos and recordings of both land acknowledgements he's given and other teachings on ceremonial objects, regalia, on the history of the Piscataway and the various branches. There's a lot to learn. You won't hear it all tonight. There's not enough time, but he's been a prolific teacher and educator, and you can, I recommend spending a little time Googling Rico Newman and watching and reading some of his prior work, because he's been really doing a lot of work to spread his knowledge. And I just so appreciate that you share your knowledge as an educator with all of us. So with no further ado, I'll turn it over to you. I think it would be wonderful to share with us a land acknowledgement, and you can choose whether you want to introduce yourself before or after.
Well, first I'll say, Wela Walaku. Good evening. Tawena mau kilanku mokik. Di kui hose na winge Choptico opis katawe. Kamiko yakio kana hagai. Basically, in my language, good evening, friends and relatives. I don't know who's out there, but I consider you all friends and relatives. and welcoming you to the homeland here, which we knew as the land between the points. And of course, we consider North America as Tulpahakan or Turtle Island, as that translates to. Anyway, I've been at this for more years than I'd like to think about. I wish I could have some of those years back. Hey, that's how the ball bounces. But I'm asked to address the issue of land acknowledgement. It's something that I've been involved in for quite a while. And as context, I usually tell people where they can relate to where it's been, where it's going. One of my favorite places to visit every year, which I didn't get to this year, is the Outer Banks of North Carolina. When it starts getting chilly here, it's still very pleasant there. And after the tourist season, it's like almost like it's my own personal backyard. But going to where I go down in Frisco, you pass that place called Kitty Hawk. I think everybody's familiar with Kitty Hawk, where the Wright brothers did a very short flight that started what today we call aviation. And as aviation has progressed over these years to where now you can get to where you're going very quickly, coast to coast, so has land acknowledgement. Um, and the thing that prompted land acknowledgement goes back to two well known and well worn fictions. Many people don't refer to it as the Inter Caetera, which is the 1493 papal bull, which was issued by the Pope at that time, basically giving full rights to the Portuguese and Spanish crown heads, the rights to any new lands found, not run by any Christian prince. So that left the whole thing wide open for the Spanish and the Portuguese. The other fiction that came later on would be the idea that the land here, especially in North America, was domicilium et vacuum, which Latin, of course, and have meaning unoccupied land, which we know not to be a truth, but is a fiction. Um, that's changed a lot. We still have not been able in all of these years, in spite of all of the letters and whatever sent to the Vatican and Rome to get the current Pope, as liberal as he seems to be, to do anything about dropping or reversing or denying the validity of the Inter Caetera, which basically gives this land to European crown heads. That being said, let's fast forward and we can jump to one of the first things that happened in the 1970s. Canada, the First Nations people, as they're called up there, started pushing the government there to acknowledge their rights as the first occupiers of the land. And push as they might, not a lot was happening. And I guess the thing that really pushed it was Australia, of all places. The Aboriginal people or Indigenous people of Australia were successful in filing a legal complaint, and it made it all the way to their Supreme Court. And if memory serves me correct, it was 1992 or 93, I believe it was 92, that the Supreme Court did acknowledge or recognized the pre-colonial land interests of the Aboriginal people of Australia. Now, of course, that didn't mean that the Europeans that were occupying Australia were going to leave or turn over all of their interest to the Aboriginal people. It's just that the Aboriginal people did earn the right to stay in those places where they were then and considered as their homelands. The efforts here in North America probably picked up its speed around 2000 when many native scholars were beginning to pick up on what was going on elsewhere and on some of the mandates coming through the United Nations stating that Aboriginal people had rights to be respected by those who occupied their homelands. The United States obviously did not sign off on that, and they did not and have not, and we don't expect that they ever will. sign off on acknowledging that. Um, Traditional occupancy of land, of course, the dates, I was speaking earlier about this, that the dates as to when Native people came to this land, that date is continually being pushed back. We all have heard about the Bering Strait and people speculate in whatever as to when that may have taken place. When did the ice melt sufficiently anyhow that people from Asia were able to come across the Bering Strait and occupy the land in North America? And then by whatever means, nobody had a Corvette to drive all the way down to South America and start occupying that and producing numbers of people and creating civilizations that we now know have been there, predating any time that the Bering Strait may have melted sufficiently to allow sufficient occupation of the entire continent. I jokingly say, I give women a lot of credit, especially back in that time where women were pretty much equal to men. Um, and I comically mentioned that if the men got up and started talking about going across this ice to some place they've never been, don't know what's there to greet them, that the women probably would have been waving at them and telling them, y'all have fun now, see you if you get back. I don't think that they would have gone with them in any numbers to be able to populate the entire Western Hemisphere. Um, and I give women a little more credit for that. But anyway, that being said, we note that just recently there's been a find in Canada that certainly predates what they call in the Wisconsin Glacier Ice Age. And there's been a recent find in South America that dates back well past 30,000 years. Um, so the jury is still out on that. But that being what it is, land acknowledgement comes down to starting for North American Indian people in the early 2000s. And it has progressed. And like I said about the Wright brothers, land acknowledgement has progressed. Up until recently, it's been pretty much what we call performative. Somebody comes out, sometimes myself in the earlier days of this, and simply inform everyone, hey, you're on Piscataway land, or you're on this tribe's land, or another tribe's land, maybe Susquehanna's, whoever's land you're on. But it puts us in a past tense, used to be. This was our land. And the word unceded, and I remind people that's spelled with a C, not an S. Unceded meaning that we didn't sell it. It wasn't lost in what's called a just war, whatever that is. And simply that we were unceremoniously and intentionally moved off the land by whatever means they found necessary. I always remind people that the lie began really in 1634, March of 1634. We're almost moving up on another anniversary year for the state of Maryland, where Cecil Calvert and company landed on an island in the Potomac River and then came upriver to meet with the Tayak, which they were advised to do, which was a good thing to do. But when he spoke with the Tayak, at least what was recorded, and we have to take it at its worth, because what was recorded was done by the Jesuit priest. And we have to assume, rightfully or not, that they would document the event correctly, honestly. And they recorded that Calvert asked the Tayak, Juanes, who was Tayak at the time, simply for a piece of land that they could settle on in order to exercise their religion. He never told the Tayak he had a piece of paper in his pocket from his king that pretty much said he didn't have to ask, because his king had already given him every inch, every acre, every square mile of what is now the state of Maryland and beyond, because Maryland assumed at that time that their limits went all the way up to above, up in Delaware. But that was never disclosed, Who knows what would have happened had he been truthful to start off with? So, I said that some of the fictions that got things started for us that dealt with land still resonate today. There are critics about land acknowledgement, and for a minute, I was one of them. I didn't see the usefulness of it because, as the critics say, that who cares? Yeah, okay, you were here first. What's next? Um, we got it now, so let's move on. Then there are others that say that natives doing land acknowledgement is pretty much performative. That when other people do land acknowledgements, it's like a confession. They're confessing that they're thieves. I mean, that's a stretch, but that's what some of the critics say. They don't want land acknowledgements to be expressed because if natives do it, they don't care. If non-natives do it, then it's like a confession that yes, we stole your land. But now, are there any remedies? Will there be what was it, the Mabo decision of 1992 down in Australia, where the Supreme Court there acknowledged their right of first possession and continued possession. Don't know if that will happen here. At least I don't think it'll ever happen in my lifetime. Not likely. Um, but they endeavor to persevere. It keeps going. Land acknowledgement, just like I said, the Wright brothers. Now we have supersonic jets. We got that thing that just took off for the moon. So who knows? The sky's the limit. It depends on who's listening and who's on the bench in the Supreme Court. That's well, I won't go there, but it depends on who is making decisions about the legality of these things. We look at treaties, and there were treaties between the tribes. The first treaty that was done in Maryland was 1666. Well, not the first one in Maryland. There was one in 1652 that had a lot of things attached to it. But as far as those on the western shore of the Potomac River and along the Patuxent, there were 13 tribes that signed that treaty, and it was a treaty of peace and amity. There was nothing in it about giving up an inch of land. But we know that the head right system was going strong, that they had already done things in England before even setting sail to start counting heads that they could bring over. And for each person they brought over, they would get a certain number of acres of land, up to 2,000, 5,000 acres of land, depending on the number of people that they encouraged or bribed or however to come over with them to settle this land. Again, none of that was ever mentioned to the TIAC that they were bringing people over here to claim the land. It just wasn't mentioned. So that head right system went on for a long time until someone said, wait a minute, we're giving up way too much. We need to keep it for ourselves. And they dropped the head right system. But it had already done its damage. A lot of people aren't aware that Maryland was a state, one of the first states to have reservations. There were 6 reservations in Maryland, 4 on this shore, the western shore where I am, and 2 on the eastern shore of Maryland. And when Maryland became a state, they decided that they no longer needed to honor that. So they immediately took that land, basically giving most of it to those men who invested their fortunes and their time to secure Maryland as a state. So their reward for their allegiance and their monetary contributions was to receive reservation land that previously had been set aside exclusively for native use. But I won't tarry on that point. But for those that feel that the critics that feel that land acknowledgement is one of those excesses that they call political correctness, it is to be politically correct. And I don't have a problem with history revision. If lies were told, if subterfuge was put in place, then it's time to start telling the truth. And land acknowledgement is one of those ways that gets done. And it needs to have more information instilled in it. But if it just serves to be an opening statement at a meeting, then it becomes just what they said, window dressing. At the end of the day, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't, there's no steps that will erase that. In fact, it doesn't help with native erasure that we see. And that gets over into another thing about mainstream education and multiculturalism, et cetera. But land acknowledgement, it's a starter. And many natives are trying to get out of being the ones to make those statements. I had a conversation with a college president who wanted me to develop a land acknowledgement for that school. And I basically said, me doing it is like you giving the answers to a test to your students. What do they learn? They don't learn a thing if you're going to give them the answers. And I told her, I said, me giving you the information to do a land acknowledgement is just the same thing. That I felt that it was up. This is a educational institution that has the resources and the access to all of the information, just as I do. Why should I be? I know whose land it is. I can track my ancestors all the way back. If the record is correct, the generations before Calvert showed up here. Now, a lot happened to my family in between that time, which is a whole nother story. But it just goes into how that they're aware of this and that it's up to other people to acknowledge it. But again, those critics that say, hey, if it's not the native saying it, if you're saying it, if your ancestors have been here for 100, 200, 300, 400 years, and you do a land acknowledgement, you are basically reciting a confession. I don't hold anybody guilty for what happened, in the 1700s or even the 1800s. But it still should be acknowledged what happened here. Um, just recently, I did a presentation on land acknowledgement at one of the state colleges. And, I mentioned the fact that we can't get past that. We can't get past it. We have to do something about it, mostly in the educational arena. That mainstream education, which basically makes sure that you're a good citizen, that you know the rules. Like I say, that religion is a right. We understand what commerce is in this country, and we know what law and order is, and we know that was brought here. All of those things were brought here, and in some way they existed before colonialism showed up. But we need to adjust to that. And I was mentioning to someone just earlier that we cannot treat people in little compartments. We can't put white people over here, black people over there, like they're museums. And I mean, this is the actuality. You look in Washington, D.C., you've got a museum for every ethnic group. They're getting ready to build a museum for women, and they're getting ready to build a museum for the Latino experience here in this country. We have the African American Museum, we have the Native American Museum, we have the Air and Space, we have art, we have all these things in the nation's capital, which separates us, which pigeonholes us. And that carries over into our educational system. At the same time, we hear people talking about have what's called a global economy. We also have a global community right here. We've got people right here. You name a country, there's somebody here from that country. Name a religion, it's practiced here. And it is weird, another conversation I had, about the Constitution. Well, the Constitution says you have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And my retort was, well, I think you should have the right to clean water, clean air, and food. Why don't you have a right to food? Anyway, then we got into the thing about Maslow's hierarchy, et cetera, and it just went on and on. Some of these arguments, there's no closing to some of these arguments, and there may not be a closing to the argument of land acknowledgement. But I think everybody will admit nobody brought land here. I don't care when they got here. I don't care what boat they came in on or whether they crossed over an ice sheet or however. Nobody brought any land here. It was here. And if you take the word earth, Mother Earth, the giver of life, and you move one letter, and you have a whole different concept about what land and acknowledging the land is all about. And that one letter is at the end of earth. Take that H, move it to the front, and it becomes heart. And that's what we believe in. That's what we hear. That's what we know. You go to a powwow, you listen to that drum and that beat. It is the rhythm of the heartbeat of the mother of the earth. And that's how we see it. Not that Hollywood thing that you hear that sounds like somebody's having a heart attack, boom, 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 boom. No, go get your medication. No, the beat that you'll hear is a double beat, just like the heart, a thump, 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 thump. So that's where we're coming from, with acknowledging the land that we need to, and I'm sort of getting off on a tangent here, about respecting the earth for all that it gives us. And acknowledging the land is acknowledging the earth, and we consider the earth as mother. I can't think of anything we have. And, I tell people sometimes, hey, if you're driving a Mercedes, guess where it got its start? In the earth. Every mineral that's used, I don't care if it's steel, aluminum, cadmium, whatever it is, it got its origin in the
plastic.
Earth. Even plastic, which probably will last as long as the earth. But these are the things that we look at. When you look at the variations in people's cultures, their teachings, their traditions, their spirituality, then it has to be considered. It's got to be a place for all of us, because nobody's going back wherever they came from, wherever their fifth, sixth, seventh generation came from to get here. They're not going back. So as Rodney Little said a long time ago, can't we all get along? So far, we haven't. I was telling one of my sons a day and a half, and I'm holding my breath for the next 2 years to see this country survive what's coming. And I hope it's not to be a worse scenario, more of the divide that we've been suffering through. But anyway, with that, I would say I think I've said enough about land acknowledgement without actually doing a land acknowledgement. Like I said, I have gotten out of the business of doing performative land acknowledgements.
Well, if you don't want to, I don't think you need to.
Yeah.
I think that the teaching, I'll tell you something that I've really responded to, both just from your speaking, and then I've been doing a lot of reading this past year. We often think the modern concept of land acknowledgement that many of us, especially in the environmental community, are starting and trying to do, and colleges, sort of progressive institutions that think about the land, does focus a lot on the people who either historically or present, in the present day, never ceded those lands. And I won't say owned. I don't think owned is the right word, but
no.
Right, but lived on and used and had relationship with the land before it was definitely taken from them. But the chapter of braiding sweetgrass, where Robin Wall Kimmerer describes the school spending the entire school spending an hour each day giving blessings of gratitude before they start school. And what you just said about the earth, and the heartbeat. I mean, a land acknowledgement is acknowledging the blessings of where we stand, right? It is about the people, but it's easy to forget that it's really about the land.
It should be, and it should be the first thing that children are introduced to. I've mentioned it to educators that, you know, children now are starting school sooner and sooner. My great granddaughter just started pre-K, and I was saying, wait a minute, she hasn't that long been out of diapers, you know, already she's going mainstream. And, you know, okay, if that's going to happen, okay, let's do that. But for the first 3 years, until she gets to some point where she has developed critical thinking on her own, that's which one of the first things she should be taught, if not at home, the first thing in school. And any kid should, unless they have allergies, they should be outside. The weather is still good when they're starting school, and now I think it's August. To get out there and get their hands in the dirt. You know, I don't care if you just got your nails dead. You know, go out and get in the dirt, plant some seeds, watch it grow, collect whatever was growing, and so that you will understand what your true relationship is with the earth. You know, it's not for simply extraction of elements in the have that someone can use in order to turn into a product, to turn it into money, to turn, you know, now you can use that as a medium exchange for the things that you really need to live. And I think the last couple of months of school, you know, as school goes out in the fall, well, in the spring, again, get back out there, and maybe the last 3 weeks of school instead of just lollygagging in class, the exams over and whatever, just BSing around as a quasi boarding system for mom and dad at work. You know, have them out there working in the soil, you know, to develop that relationship and that respect for Mother Earth. Because if Mother Earth dies, goodbye. You know, we're out of here. And last time I looked in the hell, I don't think they found anything growing on the moon or Mars. So, you know, they get the mind right. You know, here's where it is. You know, you mess up the earth, you keep putting, what is that? Stuff then coming in bags, people put on their lawns. They got beautiful golf course, green yards. And I hope I'm not jumping on anybody's yards, but why not grow something else? You know, that's edible. We talked about having food forest, and every place that one could be gone, that there's a push no, because then you're going to encourage people to not be productive. They can just go to some food forest and collect everything they need and just go to the park and start a fire and barbecue and do whatever they want to do. I don't see that happening. I know when I was a kid, and not to date myself, but way back in the day, whenever we went, there were always fruit trees, apples, peaches. You know, we could just pull them off. We would usually holler at whoever the house it was, and they would say, "Yeah, go ahead." They couldn't use it all themselves. It was going to fall on the ground and rot. It was going to fall on the ground, and the deer and everything else was going to come and eat them. So yeah, we could pull the apples. And I'll ask anybody that's listening, when is the last time you saw a wormhole in an apple? When? I haven't seen one. And we can thank the chemical industry for that.
Right, right.
But you know, this stuff is being sprayed on our food, and then if it's killing them. And the other thing is, I drive in the country a lot, and there's one time if you drove in the country, you had to turn on your windshield wipers because the insects, as you drove down through a cornfield or tobacco field, insects would just splatter your windshield. My son manages a farm over in Virginia. I drive down between the crops and nothing hits my windshield. We're killing off the insects, which, okay, you know, that gives us a better shiny apple that doesn't have a worm in it. But there's a price to pay, because there's a price to pay. And it's going to come to bear that we're the ones that's going to pay the price. Anyway, I interrupted you, I think.
No, no, I don't think you did. I was just, you know, reflecting on that. I do have a question for you. So I recently read a book, Fresh Banana Leaves by Dr. Jessica Hernandez, about specifically her culture. She's from Central America with both
Yeah.
Mexican, Oaxacan ancestry and Salvadoran indigenous ancestry, but has gotten her PhD in conservation science. And so she wrote a book about kind of the indigenous relationship to science and to conservation from her perspective. And one of the things that she talked about was just a very powerful image. She talked about stolen land and stolen people. That stolen people, you know, Africans were brought to work the stolen land. And it's very, very true in Maryland with the tobacco industry that, you know, existed in the pre-colonial and colonial era. Maryland was a major slave trading area. I wonder if, you know, how does that, you went back to the 1500s and 1600s and the treaties, and you know, you can have a little bit of land. How does land, from your historical reading and bringing in Africans, you know, change the relationship of land and people? How does the, yeah, I wonder if you just wanted to respond to that. When you think about the history and the teaching of land acknowledgement, how do you include this element of the slaves who were brought to Maryland?
Well, they were brought in to do work that others didn't want to do and to expedite production for economic reasons. Treaties, you know, when you start heading toward the south, it doesn't have to south. If you start with 1783, land, slavery, etc., that proclamation of 1783 that came out of the Paris Treaty of Paris, where there was a proclamation line. Colonists were supposed to stay on this side. On that side was Indian country. This was England and France, burning the hatchet, so to speak, with what they call the French and Indian War, which was between France and England, not the Indians. But Chief Pontiac of the Ottawa, when he heard about this treaty, he approached the English and the French and said, I have a question. You're saying that's your land over there, and this is your land over here. Where's mine?
Hmm.
And that's the first time the question was brought up, you know, with these guys slicing and dicing all of the land between themselves. They forget that there was somebody here. And we wound up, because they did go across, and even the founding father, George Washington, was one of the main culprits. You know, he might have been a good guy, but he had a dark side. He was across the proclamation line quick, fast, and in a hurry. Ultimately, they went into what was called the Old Northwest, which wound up being 6 new states to add on to the United States, and that just kept moving across. You talk about Central America, and you're coming up into Mexico. When you look at the Treaty of Guadalupe de Hidalgo, who's read that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Mexico had to give up. You know, after this. You know, we see the thing, David Crockett and Bubba J. Bowie and whatever with the Alamo and waved the flag and da-da. No, you know, you go into somebody else's backyard and then you're going to assert your rights to do as you please. And when they object, then it is, I will either you're going to have to kill me or I'm going to kill you. And you wind up now with the United States gaining 6 more states of land that previously Mexico was claiming. It was claiming land that was occupied by the tribes of the Southwest and the West. And we wound up with California, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, etc., New Mexico. They want to solve the problem that's down there, the Rio Grande, with Central and South America people trying to get away. The United States has probably negated every treaty it's ever signed, except Garcia Hidalgo. Why don't they refute that treaty and give that land back to Mexico? Problem solved. You don't have to build a wall. Give the land back to Mexico. You know, that's a cure-all, but that's not going to happen. You know it, and I know it. Not going to happen. We'll have another Alamo, a big one. But yeah, you know, we've seen that happen. And the other day I was listening to I won't say off Broadway, but it's so off of the mainstream newscast, talking about what's causing people to want to bail out of their homeland. I mean, we can look and see what justified Europeans bailing out of England and other places to come here, you know, back in the 15th, 16th century because of the conditions that existed there. If anybody reads the thing about the 7 gates of London, will understand why anybody would want to get out of there. I mean, the disease was rampant. And unfortunately, they brought a lot of that disease here when they're escaping there. But that's been the push. And it's not just here. I often challenge people, have you looked to see, I forget the date of it, the Berlin Conference, where all the crown heads of Europe got together in the 19th century to slice and dice Africa.
Mhm.
And they all, Portugal, Spain, France, Germany, Italy, uh, and of course we know about Belgium. They all went into Africa, already claimed all these places. They went in and did as much damage as they could to take all the riches that they could, which is the same thing they did here. And then they decided, wait a minute, why are we doing this? All we want is what's in the land. We don't need to have the land to get what's in it. We can manipulate the leaders, enrich them, and get ourselves rich at the same time. So I think
No.
that lasted from the late 1800s until I think 1960s. And a lot of people don't realize that Africa was still being colonized and controlled by colonial governments up until the 1960s. But now they have their own country, and I tell people, look, since my time, Second World War, Korea, Vietnam, all of the wars that I've seen and experienced during my lifetime, all of these people, whether it's Italy, Japan, Germany, wherever, they still have their countries. They still run and rule their countries. There's no foreign potentate sitting there telling them what, when, and how to do it, probably extraneously, but not directly. There's a way to control people without actually sitting in the seat that looks like it has the authority. But why then is this continent the only one where it has to continue to ignore the fact that indigenous people had rights to their land and don't control anything? Maybe a few casinos, but that's as far as it goes. Um, but anyway, I went off on a tangent. I apologize.
Well, I have a lot of questions for you that have come into the Q&A. If
Okay.
you want to see them, you should have the Q&A button yourself, and you can see them there in the open questions.
Just run by me and I'll
Uh,
answer as best I can.
yeah, so a lot of people are very interested in learning more and how they can best do land acknowledgements in different contexts. I have a specific question from Anna Kahanui, who is a certified forest therapy guide. And forest therapy guides are trained to acknowledge the previous stewards of the land. Do you have any advice for this practice and how we should do it properly?
Trees, we see trees as living entities. We call them the one-legged. Uh, they can't hop around, but they um, they live from the earth, and we use the trees as examples. Um, the leaves can be as beautiful and shiny as they can be, and that's what most people look at and what they see. They don't pay any attention to the roots. And you mentioned Braden Sweetgrass, I think it was earlier.
Mhm.
But there's another book out there which you have to read through it. It's kind of a hard read, and it's called Finding the Mother Tree.
Okay.
And it has a lot of knowledge in it about how trees, although they're not considered to be animals or that nature, you find out that they're a community. They help one another. They will pass nourishments that's needed to another tree that's lacking it. For some reason, if it can't get what it needs, the other trees will feed it. It is a beautiful book, but you have to get past the author's personal stories, which can distract you. Maybe you want you to put the book down, but keep reading, please. It's very informative. You want to find out about the life of trees. They're living entities. Now, people say, no, you can carve your initials in a tree. Did it feel it? We don't know. Are there chemical reactions to you cutting, chopping, hacking at a tree? Yes, there are. So we're finding out. So if it's alive, It's not a dead tree, it's alive. We don't know to what extent it perceives everything around it. Um, we don't know. The jury is still out. And maybe if we're still around a century from now, we'll know the life of trees. Just what do they know? What can they tell us? The only thing I was taught about trees when I was in school in biology was how they got their nourishment, the cambium and the phloem and all this kind of good stuff. But nothing about the life of a tree and how they network with each other. So if I was a forester, which I'm not, but if I was, I would be pushing that idea that the trees, like many other plants, you take tuckahoe, arrowroot, cattails, they have a network. We don't see it, so we don't realize that they're communicating with each other. They're providing nourishment to each other through their own network under the ground. We don't see it, so it doesn't matter to us. But that's what I would tell people, or a forester, to hey, there was a big old oak tree that I used to pass every morning years ago when I'd go on my walks. I would hug that tree every morning. It's and I don't care if anybody was passing by. I said, "Oh, there's that nut." So they're hugging a tree again. Yeah, because I believe that trees are alive. They don't talk to us. We don't know whether or not they're communicating to us. But I've had some elders to tell me, "You go out and sit in the woods. They will speak to you. You have to learn to listen."
So I love it. You're saying, Anna was talking about how she is trained to acknowledge the people, the traditional stewards of the land. In this case, we might say the Piscataway and also even the Nacotchtank.
Yeah.
But you're saying the trees themselves are also the stewards of the land.
Yes,
And that she can acknowledge the trees as the stewards as well.
absolutely.
I have some other specific questions for you about land acknowledgement.
Sure.
So one person, actually two people, so Daphne and Diana both have sort of similar questions. Diana asks, you said it's a good start and necessary to state the truth, but you also said a land acknowledgement shouldn't just be an opening statement at a meeting. If that's the case, what else should be done? And Daphne says, are there examples where you have seen land acknowledgements lead to action beyond expressing gratitude and increasing awareness? In what cases can it help open up possibilities for land back? So I think they're both asking, what next? Like where do you're given a great land acknowledgement, or even if you haven't, what's the real next thing to do?
Well, they pretty much gave the answer to their own question. I think it led to where they're talking about land back. And fortunately, there are a lot of tribes, because of land acknowledgement and the impact that it's having, especially in the educational institutions, that land is being given back. A lot of people aren't aware of what are called land grant colleges and universities, what that means, and what was the impact and what is the impact on Native communities with their land, the natives' land. Their reservations have dwindled, and those lands that were part of the reservation that are leased out by the Department of the Interior to private entities for grazing and for looking for oil and gas and stuff, the royalties from the doesn't go to the tribe. It's being used to fund the continued existence of what's called land grant colleges, of which right here in the state of Maryland, the University of Maryland College Park is one of those. And you can go online, write this down, and look up the Morrill Act, Morrill. I think that's correct. The Morrill Act, there were two of them. The first was in, I believe, 1860s. And after the slaves were freed, somebody said, wait a minute, what are we going to do? We've got all these free people here. What are they going to do? There were all kinds of clashes between African American, what's called the yeomen, and white yeomen in places like Baltimore, New York, Boston, Detroit, Chicago, because people don't realize slaves, especially the men, were well trained in crafts, tailors, shoemakers, husbandrymen, carpenters, bricklayers. They were skilled. So when they were freed from these plantations, they still had those skills. So when they went into these major areas like Baltimore and etc., they were competing against white yeomen for these jobs. And those who had the jobs would very readily hire the freed African because they could pay them half the salary that they would have to pay to a white carpenter or a white tailor. So, hey, a good businessman says, hey, I know a good thing when I see it. But they also wanted opportunities for the African Americans to receive an education. They could not go to schools because they were segregated. So now what do? So Morrill comes back in the 1770s and comes up with a second Morrill Act. Let's sell some more Indian land. Let's take some more of the money from the royalties from native lands and build what today we call historic Black colleges and universities.
Mm.
Even today, the University of District of Columbia is now a land grant college. I mean, what did that have? What did Washington, D.C. have to do with slavery? I mean, the University of District of Columbia didn't come into existence until the 20th century, but it is a land grant college. So it can get monies for its needs from the sale and the use of Indian land.
Wow.
Now, to their credit, a lot of schools have been built in those areas, Wisconsin, Michigan, et cetera, to serve basically on land that was formerly boarding schools turned into academic schools for natives. But anyway, it's something that people don't know or don't realize, or they know it but don't spread the word as to where these institutions came from. I mean, go online and look and see what schools all up and down the East Coast, the Midwest, the Southwest, et cetera, that exist today because of the advantages of taking land from Native people.
Wow. Wow. I certainly did not know that those pieces of information about
Yep.
especially the historically Black institutions. I didn't know that land grant sales were also used for them.
I'm saying, take my
Yeah.
word for it. Go online. That's
Wow.
social. Hey, that's what computers are for.
Wow. So it sounds like you're really emphasizing that a land acknowledgement is a real opportunity to teach, to learn specifically where you are about the people and the history of the displacement of those people, who they are today, because many of them are certainly not gone, and to teach in our own words. I think that's something you told me when we were speaking yesterday, that when you're working with someone who wants to create a land acknowledgement for their institution, you can give them the roux, the flour, the butter, the vegetables, but then they've got to build the rest of the recipe from there.
Oh, you got to do the cooking.
Yeah.
You got to get the kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a
Yes.
lot of people are asking detailed questions about your advice on land acknowledgement. It sounds like kind of your general advice is research and learn. There is no set. There's nothing to copy. You have to figure it out yourself, right?
Yeah, it's not, don't stop at, well, XYZ tribe was here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, boom, that's like, okay, I know my car's in the garage. Uh, but then you go out, there ain't no gas in it.
Right.
There's no oil in it. You don't have the keys to it. So you've got to get beyond the obvious of knowing that it's there. You've got to get beyond knowing that XYZ tribe was where you go to school or where you live. You got to look beyond. As I say, always, uh, what was the newscaster's name? Paul Harvey used to be a newsman here back in the 50s, 60s. He always gave the news coming across the AP or the UP, what we hear every day. But then he would say, I'm going to take a break. And when I come back, I'm going to give you the other side of the story. I love that man because when he came back, he told you what you were not going to hear from Walter Cronkite or anybody else. He gave you the skinny on what was going on. And a lot of people want to get him fired. He never got off of radio because of his program of telling people what was behind the story. So I admired him for that, even though it cost him career-wise. um, to do that. But anyway, I would tell people that land acknowledgement, don't stop doing them, please. Please don't stop. Keep doing them, but go beyond that. Again, put some gas in the car. Get the keys to fit the ignition. Learn how to drive. When you get out there, where are you going? Know something about that tribe. If they were there, where are they now? What happened?
Right.
I talked with my daughter the other day, who is a teacher, and she was talking about how disappointed she is in that children are not being taught critical thinking. And I said, well, that's not it. You absorb, you regurgitate. Happy day, pass the test. I get paid, I get my honors, etc. The principal is happy, I'm happy, and the children go to the next grade as dumb as they were when they got to the last grade. It's no critical thinking. I don't have to think about it. Just here's the answer, here's the question, here's the answer. What's next?
Mm-hmm.
Critical thinking. And obviously, the same thing has to happen with land acknowledgement. Just knowing what tribe was there, that's superficial.
Mm-hmm.
What happened to it? How did it happen? Who was behind it happening? There's cause and effect. Um, it's going to take some time out of your day, but hey, don't be satisfied with just this is Piscataway land that was unceded. I said, how you spell it unceded? Is that with an S or a C? I mean, come on, tell me, which way you going with this? Um, and I know that sometimes when I question people about this, it can be irritating, and I'm sorry, I apologize for that. But I feel it necessary to say what I say because Native people have been invisible for more than 2 centuries, and we're trying to climb up out of that hole. We've been down that rabbit hole for a long time. We're trying to climb up out of it. People don't understand what happened to us. I have a lot of people question me about
Mm-hmm.
how much Indian am I? Wow. But yeah, I expect to get questions like that because that's what people have been exposed to. But yeah, but if you're doing land acknowledgement, please continue, keep repeating it. It's as harmless as repeating the Pledge of Allegiance. It doesn't mean you're going to join the military and pick up a gun and go fight somebody somewhere. But keep doing it. Okay. Amen.
So, okay, I have more questions. There's many more questions that have come in.
Okay.
So, okay, I'm going to start with something specific that came in some time ago from Hillary. Hillary says, do you have recommended resources for teaching this locally? So we're coming back. We have people in the audience today from across the country, but I think the majority are from the DC region. And so Hillary asks, our school in Northwest DC is teaching the kids about the Nacotchtank, but the narrative they provided implies that there aren't any Native people here anymore. The Nacotchtank were pushed out and later absorbed by the Piscataway and others. It would be great to be able to share something more accurate that could be incorporated into DCPS curriculum citywide. And just as an aside, I mean, like the District of Columbia knows about the Piscataway people. They just went
Oh
through
yeah.
elaborate and very important, honoring of fishing treaty rights, right? Like just
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that it's not included in the DCPS curriculum. So do you have any resources that are specific for children?
There's I'm trying to think of titles. You have to pardon me. I remember books with the authors.
Mm-hmm.
There's a gentleman that wrote a book about the title of it is The Burning of Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's like finding the mother tree. You have to get past the dead wood to get to the essence of what you're trying to find. But there's a lot of information in there about the Nacotchtank who was still there in 1812 and what happened there. Back in 2003, I think was the year the National Museum of the American Indian opened, a friend of mine from the Eastern Shore came to the opening celebration and he looked sort of spent. So I asked him, what's up? He just came from providing a native service for a Nacotchtank Indian who still lived in DC.
Hmm.
So, but if it's not in the news, if it's not on the news, if it's not brought up the flagpole, people don't see it, they don't know it, so it doesn't exist. Out of sight, out of mind. Again, I talk about the invisibility of Native people. I know that when an uncle of mine lived on Sherman Avenue in D.C., across the street from him, there were some Nacotchtank Indians living there. Now, okay, that was in the 1950s, but they had children, and I'm sure they had children, and they don't run around with a tattooed on their forehead, I'm Nacotchtank. Um, and for the most part, if they said they were, the reception that they would get, no, you're not, prove it.
Mm,
It's who wants to go through that?
mm,
Um, so I believe that there still are Nacotchtanks there. I mean, when you look at the extensive land that they lived on, they weren't just at what you call Bowling Field area, which is where the main village was. They were on both sides of the Anacostia. They were all the way up to where the White House is. And their villages extended all the way up the Anacostia, all the way to today's Bladensburg. Uh, I was invited to a site where the old library was, where archaeologists were working, and I went there. It was behind a school, or behind a library. It was a library. And I approached the site where they were digging, and I said, "My God, what did they got a tunnel going on here?" And I looked, and there was a guy down in there still digging. And I looked at it, I said, "Well, how far down you going?" He said, "Well, we're still finding stuff." And he came up out of there to talk to me. And this guy, I'm 6'1". This guy was taller than me. And you could not see him. He was so far down in the ground. But having lived in Bladensburg as a kid and going to school in DC, there were days I could not get home because the Anacostia River had come up out of its banks, flooded everything. And the recent article in the paper about Peace Cross, for Veterans Day, they did a big thing about Peace Cross. I remember days all you could see of Peace Cross was the top 6 inches. Imagine how deep that water was that came up out of the
wow.
Anacostia. So you can imagine that all this alluvium soil was being removed from the Anacostia and dumped all over the place. And no wonder this guy was down 6 feet finding stuff, because that much soil had been displaced over who knows how many thousands of years.
Right.
Uh, in Bladensburg itself, where they have the old slave masters' quarters, because Bladensburg was a slave center where they brought slaves in for sale. And the guy that did that, his house is still there. Um, so there's a lot of history about Nacotchtank, the natives, the length of time that they were there, where they were, and it's a matter of record. But it's not publicized. It's not part of mainstream. It's not part of STEM.
Hmm.
Okay.
The next question I want to go back to is something that was mentioned briefly in a question, but then you went past it quickly, and I want to make sure we just get the chance. It was the land back. Could you explain for those who are not familiar what the land back concept is?
It has been going on for a while. There's a tribe on the eastern shore that was given land back, and they're not even state acknowledged, but they were given land by a church group that were going to move, and they just wanted to know, well, what do we do with the old? So they gave it to the tribe. And this has been happening across the country where, um, for various reasons, organizations that have land, maybe they're farmers. You might remember Fess Parker, the guy that played Daniel Boone on television.
I don't
Uh,
remember that.
okay, I'm showing my
I'll be
age.
honest.
Anyway, he played the guy at the Alamo swinging the gun before John Wayne got there. He owned a lot of land in California, a lot of land. And he gave that land back to the tribe it originally belonged to. And he caught Hades for doing it.
Hmm.
They thought he was setting a very bad precedent that he shouldn't be doing it. And it is occurring with more frequency now because of land acknowledgement, people are coming aware And they're looking behind door number 2 to find out, well, how did we get all of this? How did we take all of it? Why did we take all of it? Who do we take it from? What kind of conditions are they living in now? My God, we did this. So I don't know if it's conscience, guilt, I don't know what it is, or just being righteous, that they decide that I can't be on this earth forever.
Mhm.
So I'm going to leave this land to the people it rightfully belongs to. And that's happening across the country.
Wow. Okay, back to land acknowledgement and thinking about the value of land acknowledgement as something that we can use to express gratitude, something that we can ground ourselves in connection with one another and with the earth. Stella, who's with Capital of Nature, says, I am learning and appreciating what land acknowledgement of the past looks like. What do you think land acknowledgement for the future might look like? What's the
I,
next jet engine version of land acknowledgement?
I wish I could be here with you to see, but being 80, I don't know how long the Creator was going to give me to be here. I hope I have my mother's genes because she lived to be 99. Her mother 102. Uh, my dad, God bless him, left here at 51. So I got past that. So I'm hoping I got my mom's genes more than his. I don't know. I wish I could forecast that. I don't know. Um, it's not like rolling the dice. It's going to be what we make it. But you got one foot's got to be put in front of the other. Um, if land acknowledgement continues, if it has the impact that it has shown to have in other places, and as our weather comes from the West and a lot of this land back is being done in the West, I think the idea of it is going to get here in the East, just like the next snowstorm is going to
Mhm.
get here. But I don't know. I don't know, and I hazard to guess. I don't gamble, um, so I certainly can't gamble with the future. To be honest, I have to tell you, I don't know, but it's on a good path, and I hope it continues.
Yeah. Um, Thank you. I have a few more questions, but we're not going to have time to answer all of them. And I wonder if there's anything else that this discussion has sparked for you that you want to be sure to share, because we'll end right at 8:30 to really respect everybody's time. Is there anything else you want to make sure that we get a chance to speak about?
Um, that's a good one. I wasn't expecting to ad lib though. And I don't know why I can't. I'm usually pretty good at ad libbing. I look forward and I hope that the next advent of anything occurs in the realm of education.
Uh-huh.
Things are happening with the University of Maryland in that direction, which looks good for now. And I hope that it grows and progresses. I hope that ultimately there will be both a minor and a major degree program in Native Studies that isn't just about the Plains Indians and the wars of the Plains and Cochise, Geronimo, and Sitting Bull, and etc. That they start coming back and addressing some of the Native people who did their best here to try to hold on to a way of life that was doomed, because of the type of progress that was coming at them. So I'm looking for it again. Yeah, I think I earlier said this thing about, we have all these museums that are
Mhm.
segregated here, there, but it addresses the interests of these different ethno-racial groups. But I look for the educational system to incorporate that for what are they calling it? Multicultural education to
Mhm.
become a thing that's addressed in schools, starting in elementary. And I hope that children in their formative years, I mean, they can't get kids, it seems like they can't get them out of their diapers fast enough in the classroom. That if they're going to be there, get them outside, get them working in the soil, planting, seeing that where life comes from. That, yeah, I don't care if it's whatever the name of the grocery store you go to. Um, it's like somebody put a cartoon out the other day, had a microphone, looked like somebody was interviewing a deer. and said, how do you feel about this? And the deer said, well, I think we got a chance because the new millennium generation thinks all their food comes from the grocery store. So, and I responded back, yeah, well, except on the Eastern Shore, because the white-tailed deer were obliterated on the Eastern Shore. They don't exist. But that's a whole nother story. But yeah, those are the kind of things we need to address in terms of education. That it can't be just about science, technology, engineering, and math, those things that feed the machine, that keep the things going that are destroying Mother Earth. Extractive technology, it gives us what makes the world go round, but it also makes the earth, maybe it'll stop it from going around. So we need a balance. We need to come up with better ways, and maybe solar energy has a way to go yet. Wind energy has a way to go yet. Wave energy, all these alternative means of energy. Everybody's going with these electric cars, and keep telling me you can't buy electricity at the store. It comes from it has to be generated somewhere by some means. It's not free. It's not coming from free sources. Where's it coming from? Is it from some place that's being powered by oil, coal, atomic energy? And that's a whole nother thing. It's like all of a sudden you don't hear anything about the atomic waste that's coming from atomic energy plants. Where are they putting it? Um, I know a few places where they are putting it, but you don't hear anything about it. Again, out of sight, out of mind. Let's not talk about it. Maybe by the time they figure out they don't have any place else to put this stuff except maybe in your refrigerator, that they'll have a new source of power, or maybe they will find that earth-friendly planet that we can all escape to and blow this one up on the way out.
Mhm.
Yeah, but that's not going to happen. That's wishful thinking that we're going to find an Earth-like planet to go to. Uh, you better you better do what you can to keep this one under your foot.
I was going to
'Cause,
say, I think the premise of tonight's conversation is that the one we have here is the place where
hey,
we are is the
yeah,
most important, right?
yes, it
Um,
is. Yes, it is.
so, I think I heard you say, there's a specific question in the chat from Kristen who says, what are we to ultimately do with this knowledge? Where do we go with it? Rosanna says, what good is a land acknowledgement without further actions? Do something for the First Nations people. And it sounds to me like your advice, and this is you speaking personally, is go much deeper with learning and then spread that learning very actively
Yeah.
and help people to understand how incredibly, Native peoples are still here and still have relationship with the land and would like some of it back.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
right? Is there anything
Well,
else you'd add to that?
well, I would say that land acknowledgement is first and foremost a step against native erasure.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps the idea in front of people, even if they don't grasp the full extent of it. The other is it addresses issues that push people to look and to address issues that right now are impacting Native communities. Um, but without land acknowledgement, back to invisibility. So hopefully, by continuing to do it, it will take those who have a mind to again, as I use the Paul Harvey thing, the story after door, behind door number two. What is the status of Indian people? What is the status of the tribes? You still have tribes here. You have tribes in New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and it's like nobody. What's their status? What's going on with them? Um, Virginia has a University of Pembroke, which was dedicated to natives, which mostly now is non-native. Um, so but there's none in the states going north, and you have fairly recognized tribes as you go north. And people say, well, you're not real unless you're fairly recognized. That's a political relationship. It has nothing to do with anybody's ethno-racial identity. Um, so, we have to look past that. Up until January of 2012, there were no natives in the state of Maryland. And Maryland denied the existence of native people. Governor O'Malley signs a document, all of a sudden, poof, we're out of the rabbit hole. To do what? So and the proclamation he signed states specifically, this extends no benefits not enjoyed by every other citizen. So there were no perks. All he did was say that you can now, and what was the former government? Oh, you can put that on your driver's license. Where's you been? Nobody has their race on their driver's license since what, 1980s? I can put native on my driver's license. Oh, thank you very much. Whoopee, I'm happy now. Okay. Give me a couple of slices of bread and your driver's license, and I can satiate my appetite. Um, it's all I can say is keep it going, keep it going. That it's like, God, I don't want to say chopping down a cherry tree, because I understand that was a fable. Um, but you got to start somewhere, and just like us was talking about Kitty Hawk, it's a start.
Yeah, right.
And eventually we will push this thing in the hell until we can become supersonic.
No. Well,
That's my best answer.
thank you. I spent a little time just towards the end here reviewing what people had put in the chat. Some people had chatted only to us when I think they meant to chat to everyone. So I've tried to copy some of those responses, but I may not have caught all of them. If anyone does have a resource that you are not sure if you shared with everyone, please go ahead and share it again in the chat, and make sure you choose the to everyone option, not just to hosts and panelists, to make sure that you've shared it. But some great resources have been shared on land acknowledgement, on the Native Knowledge 360 curriculum for K-12 from the National Museum of the American Indian. I don't know if you worked in that. You spent a lot of time with the museum.
I worked there for 6 years as a cultural information specialist from the year before it opened up until 2009.
Mm-hmm. So I'll encourage everyone, please do make sure you share your resources in the chat, and I'll include some of those resources in the email that I send out. There have been some specific questions about land back initiatives, and we have people from all over the country here, so I'll encourage people to research and look in your area. There are several in the DC area where you can get involved in land back or contributions. Mr. Newman's been talking a lot about big scale ones, like if you have land, give it. And I'll just say an example. When I first got to speak with Mr. Newman was because we did an action alert on the Patuxent 400 acres that NASA did not need from the Goddard Space Center that's adjacent to the Patuxent Wildlife Refuge. And we encouraged comments, and Mr. Newman was on our action alert list, and he wrote to me specifically, he wrote back and he said, I think that if they don't need those 400 acres, they should give them to the Piscataways. And,
Exactly.
And I said, make sure you put that in the form so it goes to NASA. Because I don't go over it, but it was such a powerful moment of like, okay, there is land that is not always needed for any specific purpose. Conservation of some sort is a great use for this land that has not previously been developed. Who gets to do it? Who gets to be in charge? And I think those are the kinds of questions you're asking, right?
And NASA has gone dark about that land.
Yeah.
and right after that, there was another issue of a company that owned land, and because they couldn't develop on the Patuxent, they gave the land to the Girl Scouts. Then the Girl Scouts turned around and put it on the market for sale and offering it to commercial interest. And you can bet they caught it. Come on. I mean, what is that? That's, wow. That's not why that land was donated to you, for you to turn around and do with it what the company itself could not do. So, don't try to backdoor it. Give it to the Girl Scouts and then have them turn around and everybody's going to have their heartstring. Oh, the Girl Scouts, Lord, we have to help the Girl Scouts from going bankrupt. You know, let them people build those high rises on the Patuxent River. No, no, no. Just like the land that they had at NASA. Hey, give it back to who should have it. You know, the Girl Scouts can't use it. You can't build on it. We'll take it. Haven't heard a thing from them. Don't expect to.
I mean, with that, it's 8:27 and I promised to end on time, and I mean it. So there's still a number more questions in the chat, in the Q&A. I really appreciate everyone's engagement, and we're not going to be able to get to them all, but so appreciate it.
Hey, I thank you for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
I thank you for this opportunity. It's been a great learning experience. I really want to also appreciate the great resources. As I said, just in the last few minutes, I've really gone through I took a look at the chat. Thank you all for sharing what you've learned, what you know, what you've done. And thank you, Mr. Newman, for sharing with us. I don't think you even gave a land acknowledgement, which is just fine.
Well, I acknowledge this land as the home of my ancestors. I acknowledge this land as being the flesh, blood, and bones of my ancestors who have lived and died here over the past 30,000 plus years.
Thank you. I acknowledge this land as the place that is my home and that sustains me with its soil and its clean water and its fresh air and its beauty.
Hey. And no free food.
Unfortunately, we do have cherry tomatoes.
Yeah, but I thank you. And in my language, I thank everyone for the opportunity.
Thank you all. Thank you again, Mr. Newman. Thank you to everybody for coming.
Wanishi. Thank you.
Have a great night. And let's enjoy the winter.
Yeah. The Pishkanewe, I will see you again.
Pishkanewe?
Hey, the Pishkanewe.
Pishkanewe.
We don't say goodbye. That's too permanent.
Right. No.
I'll see you again.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
All right. Well, have a wonderful evening, everyone, and thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. I hope.